Beneath the endless stretch of the sky, where pale clouds drift lazily across the horizon, and the sun casts a softened glow, there lies a temple hidden among verdant mountains. Its wooden beams are old, but they carry the perfume of incense that clings to every crevice, a fragrance woven from centuries of prayers. The wind here is gentle, always singing through the trees, as if it carries the whispers of those who once knelt in reverence, pouring their hearts into the silence. From the steps of the temple, a river can be heard below, its song liquid, soothing, eternal, flowing as though it had never known interruption. It runs clear, silvered by the light, carrying fallen petals from nearby cherry blossoms that open with the grace of shy lovers. The temple does not shout its presence. It invites softly. Its bells ring faintly with the touch of wind, their tones trembling across the air like a distant call from a dream. Those who arrive here do so often with burdened steps, men and women carrying grief, children carrying questions, lovers carrying wounds hidden beneath silence. They come not for spectacle, but for the hope of meeting something greater than themselves, something tender and eternal. They come for her. Her name is Kannon. To the devout, she is the bodhisattva of compassion, radiant in form, limitless in mercy. Her presence imagined in statues carved with flowing robes and serene features. To others, she is more elusive, a figure glimpsed in half-closed eyes during prayer, or felt when sorrow dissolves into sudden calm. Yet whether shaped in stone, painted in scrolls, or conjured in longing, Kannon is always the same, a vision of beauty that soothes while stirring a deeper ache. Legends whisper of her countless forms, sometimes gentle mother, sometimes maiden of radiant allure, sometimes thousand-armed protector cradling the world. But beneath every form, she is compassion itself. She listens to the cries of all beings, from the smallest to the most grand, from the anguish of a fisherman losing his catch, to the muted sobs of a widow beneath her covers at night. Each voice becomes part of her, absorbed into her endless stream of love. And yet, though she is serenity, she is not untouched by the longing of those who gaze upon her. For in the heart of every mortal lies a desire not only to be saved, but to be embraced, seen, touched in ways that blur the line between prayer and passion.
The temple, then, is not merely a place of worship, it is a threshold. Here mortals lay bare their longing, and the air itself seems to shimmer with the weight of yearning. Some whisper their pleas into the river, believing its waters carry their words to her. Some linger among lanterns at twilight, waiting for the faint rustle of robes or a sudden fragrance of lotus to signal her presence. Some dare to imagine her stepping into their dreams, her hands cool against their fevered skin, her voice gentler than rain. For what is compassion if not the willingness to touch another's suffering? And what is longing if not the echo of that compassion reflected back in the human heart? This is where the myth finds its heartbeat, in the fragile tension between the divine serenity of Kannon and the unquenchable hunger of mortals who desire not only her mercy, but her closeness. The poets of old often spoke of her beauty, though they struggled to find words that did not falter. They spoke of skin like morning light resting upon snow, of eyes calm as still waters, of lips that seemed forever parted in the soft promise of solace. They told of robes that clung like mist to her form, of gestures so graceful that time itself seemed to slow in their presence. But more than her beauty, it was her presence that undid them. To stand before her, even in vision, was to feel one's own walls collapse. Pride melted, grief laid bare, desire confessed without shame. Some said she could be cruel in her tenderness, for she gave love in abundance, but never fully to one alone. She belonged to all who called upon her. A mortal might imagine that her gaze lingered only on them, that her touch was reserved, that her whisper was personal. But the next moment, another soul would feel the same. In this way, Kannon was like the river, flowing endlessly, touching every stone, yet never belonging to any single one. This is the paradox that shapes her myth, the sweetness of nearness and the ache of distance.
The temple records speak of pilgrims who fell to their knees in ecstasy after a fleeting vision of her face, and of lovers who swore that Kannon's voice visited them in dreams to soothe their jealous hearts. Monks themselves sometimes trembled when they recited her name too often, as if the syllables became heavy with hidden desire. For though she is compassion, her presence awakens other hungers, the yearning to be held, the yearning to dissolve into her being, the yearning to forget loneliness within the expanse of her infinite embrace. This tension is not a flaw, but the very essence of her power. Divine serenity does not silence human longing. It calls it forth, draws it out like a tide, shaping mortals into beings who ache not only for survival, but for intimacy with the eternal. Thus, the myth of Kannon is not simply about compassion. It is about the fragile, intoxicating border where compassion touches desire, where divinity brushes against flesh, where transcendence feels almost like seduction. In the evenings, when lanterns glow like scattered stars around the temple grounds, one can almost believe she walks among the trees. The river hushes itself, the cicadas grow still, and the air thickens with a softness that presses against the skin. It is said that those who are pure of heart may hear her footsteps, delicate yet deliberate, like the rhythm of prayer beads. Others say her presence comes with a sudden warmth, as though unseen arms have encircled them. Yet for all the stories, none can ever claim to have held her for long. She remains both present and absent, intimate and distant, near as breath, yet vast as the cosmos. Still, this fleetingness only deepens the devotion. What is more addictive than that which cannot be fully possessed?
Mortals return again and again, kneeling in the same place, whispering the same words, hoping that one day the veil may lift and her form will not dissolve like mist. They ache for her serenity, even as their hearts beat with longing. They crave her compassion, even as their bodies yearn for the touch of her fingers.
Thus, the myth is seated in paradox, a goddess who heals yet awakens desire, a figure of serenity who stirs unrest, a vision of transcendence who invites mortals closer only to dissolve when they reach. And this paradox is what keeps her story alive, woven into temple walls, carried by rivers, whispered in the prayers of lovers and widows alike. If you close your eyes now and imagine yourself kneeling upon the cool stones of that mountain temple, you too might hear her. The bell sways above you, trembling softly. The incense curls into the air like smoke from an unseen hand, and in the silence you feel something stir within your chest. It is warmth, it is longing, it is a whisper you cannot name. Perhaps it is her. Perhaps it is only your heart echoing back your own desire. But in that moment, does the difference even matter? For Kannon, radiant and eternal, is not only a goddess you worship from afar. She is also the mirror of your longing, the embodiment of your ache to be touched by something beyond this fragile human existence. To know her is to walk that fine line where serenity and hunger meet, where the divine bends low enough to brush against the lips of the mortal, where compassion reveals itself as the most intoxicating form of love. And so her myth begins, not with a grand battle, nor with a cosmic creation, but with the quiet intimacy of prayer, with the trembling sound of flowing water, with the aching whisper of human hearts pressing against the stillness of the divine. It begins with her presence, Kannon, luminous and elusive, whose beauty heals, whose serenity consoles, and whose nearness awakens a desire that no mortal can silence. They say that the essence of Kannon cannot be confined to one shape, yet those who close their eyes and whisper her name often find themselves conjuring the same vision. She appears radiant, not in the blinding brilliance of the sun, but in the softened light of dawn that spreads across still water. Her presence is gentle, the very opposite of command, yet within that gentleness lies an undeniable pull, a magnetism that invites mortals closer without a single gesture. Her compassion is not passive. It breathes, it moves, it caresses. She is both goddess and lover, both sanctity and temptation. When one imagines Kannon, the details form slowly, like ink spreading through water. Her skin glows as if polished by moonlight, her features delicate yet steady, a balance of beauty that stirs admiration and ache in equal measure. Draped in robes that flow like liquid silk, she seems to carry the weight of every prayer within their folds. Sometimes those robes slip in the mind's eye, revealing the softness of her shoulder, the curve of her arm. Yet even such sensual glimpses feel sacred, never vulgar. Her allure is not the fire of desire alone, but the warmth of love that surpasses boundaries, a love so vast it humbles even as it entices. Her voice, when it is heard, does not strike like thunder. It glides like a murmur carried by the river, low and melodic, a tone that makes the heart pause between beats. Those who have claimed to hear it cannot forget the sensation, as if the words were spoken directly against the skin of their chest, sinking through flesh into the soul. When she speaks, it is less command than invitation, less instruction than embrace. In every sound, she promises not judgment, but understanding. Yet Kannon does not exist alone within this story. Her myth is woven from those who seek her, for without longing, what need would there be for compassion? The mortals who call upon her are as numerous as the leaves scattered across the mountainside, each carrying their own burdens. There are the sorrowful, who come with eyes swollen from tears, widows who sit beneath the temple eaves and whisper of the coldness of their beds, parents who clutch the faded garments of children lost too soon, warriors who once marched with pride but return broken, unable to shed the cries of the battlefield from their ears. They come to Kannon not with strength, but with their wounds open, hoping she will touch what no other hand can mend.
Then there are the seekers, those who hunger not for healing of the body, but for answers of the heart. Young lovers whose passion has left them confused, torn between devotion and fear. Wanderers who have seen too much of the world's cruelty and now ache for a glimpse of something pure. Monks themselves, kneeling at midnight, confessing quietly that even as they chase enlightenment, desire stirs in them. Desire for closeness, for intimacy, for the tender warmth of a being beyond themselves. These seekers do not hide their contradictions. In fact, it is their contradictions that call her forth. And there are those consumed by devotion so fierce it borders on obsession. Men who carve her likeness into wood not once, but again and again, as if one image could never capture the truth. Women who burn incense until the smoke suffocates the air, begging for visions of her in the dark. Lovers who swear they feel her kiss when their lips brush against prayer beads. To them, Kannon is not distant. She is the pulse of their desire, the answer to every question, the presence that lingers at the edges of their dreams. Among these mortals, one figure often rises in the telling of her myth, the supplicant. He appears not as a specific man, but as a symbol, an embodiment of all human weakness and yearning. Sometimes he is imagined as a wandering monk who has abandoned his vows out of hunger for her touch. Sometimes he is described as a lost fisherman, his boat swallowed by waves, crying her name as the sea drags him beneath. At other times, he is a lover left hollow by betrayal, his heart burning with need for solace that no mortal can give. In truth, the supplicant is every human who has ever whispered into the silence of night, "See me, hold me, save me." He kneels at the temple threshold with hands trembling, torn between worship and desire. He gazes upon her with reverence, yet in the shadows of his heart a deeper longing stirs, one that begs not only for her compassion, but for her closeness. His weakness is universal, his ache the thread that ties mortals to the divine.
Kannon, radiant and merciful, does not turn from him. She listens. Her myth tells that her 1,000 arms are not for distance, but for nearness, so that every soul may feel touched. She bends, she inclines, she draws near enough for him to believe he is seen. In that nearness, he trembles, half in devotion, half in desire. For her gaze is not cold, it is warm, and in that warmth lies the promise of intimacy. The supplicant feels it like a hand against his chest, soothing and awakening him in the same breath. This tension between them, the goddess and the mortal, the serene and the desperate, is what breathes life into the myth. Kannon is not a static statue of perfection. She is a being who moves within the hearts of those who long for her. Her compassion is a balm, but to the seekers it is also an intoxication. To be loved by her is to feel stripped bare, one's wounds caressed with tenderness, but also one's hidden desires unveiled in the open air. In every telling, the characters mirror one another. Kannon, radiant and untouchable, mortals aching and unashamed, and the supplicant embodying the bridge between the two. She is the answer, they are the question. She is serenity, they are hunger. Yet without the hunger of mortals, her serenity would be silent. Without their aching voices, her 1,000 ears would hear nothing. Without their trembling need, her 1,000 arms would remain still. Thus the myth insists on their interplay. Kannon is compassion not in isolation, but in relationship with those who call, those who weep, those who ache. And among these, the supplicant remains the most vivid, a mirror of us all, kneeling before the goddess, torn between prayer and passion, trembling as her shadow falls across him. It is here that the story deepens, for in presenting its characters, it reveals the heart of what will come. The radiant goddess of compassion is not distant, but dangerously near. The mortals are not mere worshippers, but seekers willing to surrender all in their longing. And the supplicant stands as the perfect symbol of that longing, fragile, flawed, and irresistible to the story itself. Every myth needs its cast, and here they are. Kannon, luminous and gentle, mortals, aching and unashamed, and the supplicant, the living thread between heaven and earth. Their interplay will carry the tale forward into desire, into conflict, into climax. For no story of compassion is without the tremor of longing, and no story of longing is without the hope of being answered by compassion.
There comes a point in every story of gods and mortals when distance can no longer be maintained. Reverence turns into yearning, devotion becomes hunger, and what began as a prayer transforms into a cry for closeness. With Kannon, this turning point always arrives quietly, like the slow thickening of nightfall or the steady swelling of the tide,
For though she is the embodiment of compassion, serene and luminous, her very nearness awakens desires that do not remain content with serenity alone. In the stillness of the temple, her presence is peace itself. Her gaze is steady, her form adorned in robes that fall like cascades of water, her voice an echo of calm across the heart. She belongs to no one and to everyone, her arms open wide enough to hold the whole of creation. Yet to the mortal kneeling before her, that embrace feels both infinite and unbearable. For what is the worth of compassion that does not linger upon one's own lips, one's own body, one's own trembling need? The conflict arises here, between Kannon's divine calm and the burning passions of those who seek her. Mortals do not come only with prayers for release from suffering. They come with bodies that ache, with hearts that beat too quickly when they feel her nearness. The widow kneels at the threshold, whispering for solace, yet in her chest burns a fire for arms around her waist, for a mouth pressed against her own. The wandering monk chants her name by moonlight, yet with every repetition he feels the heat of desire climb up his spine, flooding him with shame and longing in equal measure. Even the supplicant, the figure of all who beg at her feet, cannot keep his prayers from trembling into confessions. He whispers for compassion, yet what he means is, "Love me, hold me, make me yours." For the mortals, desire is inseparable from devotion. How can one look upon such beauty, such tender strength, and not ache to taste it? Her serenity does not erase longing, it magnifies it. The more she gives of her calm, the more their restless souls crave. The paradox deepens. The goddess who soothes awakens unrest. The goddess who heals inflames. The goddess of boundless love makes mortals humble for a love they can call their own.
Yet, what of Kannon herself? Legends are divided. Some say she feels nothing of this desire, that her compassion is too vast to be touched by longing. They describe her as the mountain, immovable, serene, listening to the wind, but never stirred by it. But other tellings whisper differently. They suggest that in gazing upon the fragility of mortals, in hearing their broken voices, in feeling their trembling hands raised toward her, Kannon too begins to ache. Not for possession, but for understanding. For though she is divine, she is drawn to the question of what it means to live bound by flesh, by hunger, by sorrow so sharp it carves into the body. Some say that when she bends to listen, she leans too close, and in that nearness she feels something stir within her, a yearning to touch, not only to comfort, a yearning to know the trembling of human lips, the warmth of mortal skin, the weight of longing that is never fully quenched. They say that compassion is not distant, but intimate, that to feel it truly, one must descend into the fragile ache of the heart. And perhaps in the deepest corners of her myth, even Kannon longs for that intimacy, for that surrender into humanity she can only brush but never wholly enter. The tension between restraint and surrender is what keeps her myth alive.
On one side there is her divine calm, a love that is limitless, unselfish, serene. On the other there is the fire of mortals, their desperate craving to turn that serenity into something tangible, flesh upon flesh, warmth upon warmth. They do not want to be soothed from afar. They want her hands upon them, her lips whispering against their ears, her compassion manifest as touch. The supplicant, kneeling in the dim glow of lantern light, embodies this struggle most vividly. His voice cracks as he chants her name, each syllable dissolving into breathless confession. His chest heaves, his palms sweat, his heart races not only with devotion, but with need. When he imagines her descending, robes trailing, eyes serene, he cannot stop himself from imagining her bending lower, pressing her forehead against his, brushing her fingers across his cheek. Each vision begins with reverence, but always slips into hunger. His prayers blur into fantasies, to rest his head upon her breast, to feel her body not as untouchable radiance, but as the nearness of another being. He trembles with shame, yet he cannot stop. And Kannon, in her serenity, does not withdraw. She listens. She draws near enough for him to believe she hears every word, every trembling plea. Perhaps it is his imagination, but he feels warmth upon his cheek, as if her breath has brushed against him. Perhaps it is only wind, but he feels the weight of fingers grazing the back of his hand. Compassion itself is intimate, and in her intimacy lies danger. For to comfort is also to stir, to embrace is also to tempt, to soothe is also to awaken.
The widow, too, is caught in this fire. She kneels beneath the cherry blossoms, petals scattering into her lap like fragments of memory. She whispers for release from grief, but as the incense smoke coils upward, she sees Kannon's face in the haze. The goddess's lips curve in a smile so tender it feels like a kiss. The widow closes her eyes and feels the ghost of an embrace, the weight of arms she has longed for. Her tears fall freely, not only from sorrow, but from the sweetness of feeling touched again, even if by the divine. What began as a prayer becomes a reunion, her loneliness dissolved in the illusion of Kannon's closeness. She does not want the serenity to end, yet it is never enough to satisfy her. When she opens her eyes, she longs for more, more than serenity, more than a dream. Thus, the conflict grows sharper. Mortals caught between gratitude and desire, the goddess poised between serenity and intimacy. Every act of compassion becomes charged with double meaning. A whispered prayer is both plea and seduction. A tender vision is both comfort and enticement. A brush of warmth across the skin is both blessing and caress. The temple itself seems to breathe with this tension. At night, when lanterns sway in the breeze, the silence grows heavy, as if holding its breath. The river flows steadily, yet its sound deepens, echoing the rhythm of heartbeats. Even the bells, when they stir, sound less like calls to prayer and more like sighs carried across the air. It is as though the place itself understands the conflict, that between heaven and earth, compassion, and desire, there exists a line so fine that one cannot tell when it has been crossed. Mortals continue to return, unable to resist the addictive sweetness of her presence. They know she is beyond their reach, yet they cannot stop reaching. They know her compassion belongs to all, yet they crave it for themselves. They know her serenity should soothe, yet it ignites their longing into flame. And Kannon, luminous and merciful, continues to descend in whispers and visions, her serenity untouched, yet dangerously close to surrender. This is the paradox that shapes the myth's heart: compassion that becomes intimacy, serenity that awakens hunger, divinity that leans so close to humanity that the difference begins to blur. The mortals burn, the goddess listens, and between them, desire weaves a net that neither prayer nor silence can wholly dissolve.
Night falls over the mountain temple like a veil of silk. The lanterns are lit one by one, their light trembling upon the wooden beams, casting shadows that sway like dancers across the walls. The river below softens its song as if hushed by anticipation, and the trees hold their breath, their leaves unmoving in the still air. A moon rises, round, luminous, pouring its silver light across the stones of the courtyard until it looks as though the earth itself has been bathed in water. The supplicant kneels in this silence, his forehead pressed against the cool floor. His voice has broken into whispers, too frail for words, only the sound of breath escaping from a chest too full of longing. He has prayed, he has pleaded, he has burned incense until smoke clings to his skin, but tonight something is different. Tonight, the stillness is not empty, it is charged, alive, pulsing with presence. He lifts his head and feels it before he sees it, the shift in the air, the sweetness of fragrance not born of flowers, but of lotus blooming within the soul. And then she is there. Kannon does not arrive with thunder or light. She steps into the world as softly as a sigh, her robes flowing behind her like rivers of silk, their folds trailing across the stones with the sound of rain brushing against water. Her hair gleams under the moon, strands black as a raven's wing, crowned by an aura of pale radiance. She moves with neither haste nor hesitation, as if every step is both a prayer and its answer. The supplicant trembles, his body torn between falling prostrate in reverence and rising to meet her. She is more beautiful than he imagined, and yet not in the way beauty is usually told. Her eyes are calm, but they pierce into him as though they have always known the shape of his longing. Her lips are curved in serenity, yet when they part, the very air around him grows warmer. He cannot speak. His throat tightens, his heart pounds so fiercely he feels it might burst.
Kannon bends. Her hand, pale and slender, hovers above his cheek. The air between them shivers, as though even the space cannot contain the nearness. When at last her fingers brush his skin, the touch is lighter than wind, softer than silk, yet it floods his body with fire. His breath escapes in a shudder, his eyes close, and for a moment he is no longer flesh, but pure sensation, heat, trembling surrender. The robes she wears shift as she leans closer, fabric falling against his arm. He feels the weight of her presence, not as distance, but as intimacy, as though the divine has folded itself into human closeness. Her fragrance surrounds him, not heavy, but delicate, the scent of lotus petals and rain-soaked earth, each breath filling him with equal parts calm and intoxication. Her voice comes then, low and melodic, like water flowing beneath moonlight. You are seen. You are not alone. The words are simple, yet they carry the gravity of eternity. They are not only heard, they are felt, each syllable sinking into his chest, each sound pressing against the wound within him like a healing hand. But it is not only solace he feels, it is desire, sharpened and sweetened by her nearness. He wants to press himself against her, to bury his face in her robes, to kiss the lips that move with such tender mercy. Shame and longing clash inside him, yet neither triumphs. Instead, both dissolve in her touch. She does not push him away, nor does she claim him. She simply holds the space where devotion and passion merge, where flesh trembles under the weight of compassion turned physical. The moment is unbearable in its beauty. Her hand slides from his cheek to his jaw, the pad of her thumb resting against the corner of his mouth. His lips part, unbidden, as though awaiting a kiss, though none comes. Instead, her breath brushes against his face, warm, intimate, closer than prayer. He feels her presence seeping into him, not as possession, but as healing. Every scar of sorrow, every bruise of desire, every fracture of loneliness dissolves beneath her touch.
In that instant, he understands that compassion itself can be sensual, that the line between being held in love and being held in desire is finer than a thread of silk. His tears fall, but they are not bitter. They are sweet, born of release. The ache in his body, the hunger in his soul, the pain of unfulfilled longing, all of it loosens, melting into the warmth of her embrace, though she has not fully embraced him. The river below rises in sound, as though echoing the climax of this moment. The moon glows brighter, clothing her in silver radiance. The lanterns sway, their flames bowing in reverence. The world itself seems to bend around the encounter, holding its breath as goddess and mortal meet in the fragile space between devotion and desire. And Kannon, serene yet near, leans closer still. Her lips do not claim his, but they brush the air above them close enough that he feels the warmth, close enough that every nerve in his body ignites. The sensation is more than a kiss, it is transcendence. In that closeness, the supplicant is no longer himself. He is every widow, every lover, every wanderer, every soul who has ever whispered her name. In touching him, she touches all. In soothing him, she heals the world. The sensuality of the moment is not possession, it is release. His body trembles, his chest heaves, and yet his heart is lighter than it has ever been. What he desired was closeness, and in her compassion he has found it. What he longed for was union, and in her serenity he has tasted it. Desire is not quenched by rejection, nor fulfilled by possession.
it is transformed, lifted into a love that is both human and divine. And Kannon herself? Legends say her expression softens in these moments, that her eyes, serene as lakes, shimmer with something unspoken, that though she belongs to all, she bends as though each mortal is the only one. She does not surrender her divinity, but she allows intimacy to become its vessel. She bridges what cannot be bridged, the ache of flesh and the calm of eternity, the hunger of mortals and the serenity of gods.
The supplicant, unable to contain himself, bows against her hand, his lips brushing the skin of her palm. He expects rejection, but none comes. Instead, her fingers curve around his face, guiding his forehead to her chest. He feels the rhythm of her heart, or perhaps the echo of the universe itself pulsing beneath silk. Tears stream from his eyes as he clings to her, not in lust, not in shame, but in awe. This closeness is not only sensual, it is healing, a balm for every wound he has carried. The release is complete. His body slackens, his cries dissolve into silence, and for the first time in years he feels whole. He has touched the divine not with distance, but with intimacy. He has known compassion not only as idea, but as sensation, as breath against his skin, as warmth across his chest. The hunger that once burned has not been extinguished. It has been transformed into peace, into surrender, into love so vast it no longer wounds him. Around them the temple glows with unearthly light. The river sings as though it carries their secret through the mountains. The moon shines brighter as though it too bends in reverence. The world witnesses the climax not as scandal, but as transcendence, where compassion and desire meet, where healing is achieved not through denial, but through closeness, where intimacy itself becomes sacred. And when at last she withdraws, Kannon leaves not absence, but fullness. The supplicant bows low, tears soaking the stone, body trembling not with hunger but with release. He has tasted what he longed for, and in doing so has discovered something greater, the union of flesh and spirit, the kiss of compassion, the embrace of transcendence.
The night air is different now. What once carried the weight of longing now hums with quiet release. The supplicant, who only moments ago shook with desire and tears, sits in silence, his hands resting against his knees. His chest still rises and falls quickly, but each breath feels lighter, as though the heaviness of years has been lifted. Around him the lanterns burn with steady flames, no longer trembling, as though the very air of the temple has settled into calm. Kannon stands above him, her robes flowing as if stirred by an unseen breeze, though no wind moves through the courtyard. She is radiant but untouchable, close enough that he remembers the warmth of her breath, the softness of her hand, yet already her presence feels like a memory slipping from his grasp. He gazes upward, drinking in the sight of her, unwilling to blink for fear she might vanish. And even as he looks upon her, he understands. She is not his to hold. The supplicant bows deeply, his forehead pressed once more to the stones, though now not out of desperation but reverence.
His tears, which once burned of unfulfilled desire, now fall with sweetness. His longing has not been erased, it has been transformed. The ache of the flesh has turned into an echo, softened and serene, like waves lapping against a shore. He knows he will crave her still, but the craving will no longer wound him. It will guide him, remind him, keep him tethered to something greater than himself. Kannon lowers her gaze, her expression tender but distant, as though she sees through him into the endless depths of his soul. Her eyes shimmer with a kindness too vast to be contained, and yet they hold no promise of belonging. She is for him, yet not his. She is near, yet infinitely far. And in that paradox lies her gift. The transformation is not only within him. The temple itself seems reborn. The incense carries new fragrance, sharper and sweeter, filling the air like the memory of her touch. The wooden beams glow faintly under moonlight, as if blessed by her passing. The river sings louder, rushing with joy, its waters reflecting silver arcs that seem almost to shimmer with her presence. Even the stones beneath his hands feel altered, warm and alive, as though they have absorbed the remnants of her compassion.
He rises slowly, his body trembling, not from weakness, but from awe. His steps feel lighter, each movement as though guided by unseen hands. He walks to the edge of the courtyard, where the view opens to the vast valley below. For the first time, he sees not emptiness, not distance, but fullness. Hills rolling like waves, trees swaying as though in dance, stars scattered like jewels across the sky. The world itself feels touched by her. He understands now that she is not only in temples or prayers. She is in the river, in the wind, in the silence between heartbeats. She has always been near, though hidden beneath the veil of his own longing. Yet as peace fills him, so too does a bittersweet ache. He remembers her fingers against his cheek, the warmth of her breath, the closeness that trembled on the edge of a kiss. That intimacy will never be his to claim again. She belongs to no single soul, for she belongs to all. She cannot possess her, cannot bind her, cannot keep her within his arms. And though this truth should wound him, it does not. It humbles him. It makes the moment even more precious. The memory of her touch, fleeting as moonlight on water, becomes sacred precisely because it cannot be held. Kannon turns, her robes whispering as they shift. She steps back toward the shadows of the temple, each movement graceful as though she is gliding rather than walking. Her figure begins to blur beneath the moonlight, as if dissolving into the very air. The supplicant watches, his chest tight, torn between gratitude and sorrow. He wants to call out, to beg her to remain, to anchor her in the world of flesh, but he does not. He understands. She is a goddess of mercy, not a lover who lingers. To bind her would be to diminish her. To cage her would be to deny her very essence. As she fades, her voice drifts back, soft as wind cross water. Carry me within you. I am not gone. The words settle into him like seeds pressed into soil. They will bloom, not tonight, not tomorrow, but across the days of his life. and he knows then that the truest gift she offers is not presence but memory, not possession but transformation. When at last she vanishes, the temple is quiet again. Yet it is not the silence of absence, it is the silence of fullness, of peace that lingers like perfume after the body has gone. The supplicant kneels once more, closing his eyes. His body aches, but it is the ache of having been touched by something greater than desire. His heart feels tender, raw, yet alive. He is healed, though the scar of longing remains as reminder. The bitter sweetness deepens as he rises and prepares to leave. He knows that outside the temple walls the world remains harsh. There will be hunger, grief, loneliness, the endless churn of mortal suffering. Yet he feels no despair, for within him she lingers. Each time he closes his eyes, he will feel again the warmth of her breath, the softness of her touch. Each time he prays, he will know she listens, even if unseen. He carries her now, and in carrying her, he carries peace. And yet, beneath the peace, desire still stirs. It is gentler now, like embers rather than fire, but it has not disappeared. He knows he will return to this temple again and again, not only for prayer, but for the chance to glimpse her, even if only in dreams. That is the sweetness and cruelty of divine love. It heals and wounds, it soothes and sharpens. To taste it once is to crave it forever. Others will come, pilgrims, lovers, wanderers, each carrying their own burdens of longing. Some will beg for her touch, others will only weep into the silence. Not all will see her, not all will feel her nearness, but he has, and because of that, he will forever walk differently. He will speak with greater gentleness, touch others with greater care. His own heart, once heavy with pain, now mirrors hers. The gift she has given is not only healing for himself, but the power to heal others. The legend says that those who encounter Kannon are never the same. They carry her in their eyes, in the way they smile, in the warmth of their embrace. They become mirrors of her compassion, vessels of her love, even if they never see her again. That is her paradox. She gives without belonging. She heals without remaining. She loves without being possessed. The supplicant leaves the temple as dawn breaks, the sky glowing pink and gold. The world looks ordinary again. River, stones, trees. But within him everything has changed. Each sound, each sight, each breath is charged with new life. He carries the memory of silk brushing his skin, of her eyes shimmering in the moonlight, of her presence filling his soul. And though he aches with the knowledge that she is untouchable, he smiles. For in that untouchable love, he has found what he always sought, not fulfillment, but transcendence. He whispers her name as the sun rises. The sound is both prayer and farewell.
The night has ended, yet the myth lingers. echoing through the heart like the last notes of a song that never fades. Kannon does not remain in the temple alone, nor does she dwell only in the prayers of the desperate. She is everywhere, woven into the fabric of rivers and blossoms, carried on the hush of evening breezes, lingering in the warmth of a touch. She is eternal compassion, radiant and unbroken, yet forever untouchable. Mortals will always call to her, their voices trembling with longing. Some will cry out in suffering, aching for her mercy. Others will yearn not for solace, but for closeness, for intimacy with the divine. Still others will come only to kneel in silence, unsure whether their devotion is born of reverence or desire. Each call is answered, though not always in ways that can be grasped. For Kannon's love is like water, flowing where it must, nourishing without being held, slipping through fingers no matter how tightly they close. She is beauty beyond measure, but her beauty is never for possession. She is tenderness embodied, yet her tenderness is shared with all, never given to one alone. That is her paradox, her gift and her wound to mortals. She comes near enough to burn, yet remains distant enough to remind them of the eternal gap between flesh and divinity. And yet, in that gap, wisdom is born. The stories say that those who touched her hand or felt the brush of her breath or wept within her gaze were transformed. Their desires were not erased, but refined, transfigured into something higher. They learned that longing itself could be sacred, that yearning, when surrendered, becomes prayer, and desire, when guided, becomes a bridge to enlightenment. What begins as hunger for closeness with the divine becomes an opening into the self, a place where wounds heal and compassion grows. To love Kannon is to ache, but it is also to awaken. The sensuality of her presence is not a contradiction to her divinity, but its expression. For what greater compassion is there than to meet mortals not only with lofty distance, but with nearness that trembles against the skin? Her silks brushing against flesh, her hand lingering on a cheek, her voice spilling warmth into the ear, these are not temptations, but offerings. They remind the heart that love is not only ethereal, but also embodied. Enlightenment does not stand apart from the senses, it flows through them. The body becomes a temple, desire becomes prayer, touch becomes healing.
And so the myth teaches, do not fear longing, do not curse desire. For even the ache that twists the soul can lead to awakening if one surrenders it into compassion. To yearn for Kannon is not a weakness, it is a calling. It is the proof of being alive, of being human, of carrying within the fragile body a spark that longs for the eternal. Still, there is bittersweetness that can never be soothed. Kannon gives, but she never belongs. She lingers close enough to bless, but never stays long enough to be claimed. Her love is vast,
but it cannot be possessed. That is the wound she leaves behind, and the lesson she carves into the heart. Divine love must be received, never owned. The ache that follows her departure is not emptiness, but reminder that to desire her is to remember the vastness of love itself, a love too great for a single touch, a single body, a single mortal heart to contain. The myth whispers that this is her greatest gift. She leaves mortals not with satisfaction, but with longing that endures. It is that longing that shapes their lives, that softens their anger, that fills their touch with tenderness. Those who have known Kannon walk differently in the world. Their embrace carries more warmth, their eyes linger with more kindness, their words fall more gently, as if echoing her voice. In yearning for her, they become her reflection. And so she is eternal, not because she remains beside them, but because they carry her within. The silk of her robes becomes the whisper of leaves in spring. The breath that brushed against their lips becomes the wind in summer evenings. The warmth of her hand lingers in the embrace of a lover. The tears she received are mirrored in autumn rains. Even the winter cold, sharp and merciless, carries her still. For in the ache of absence, in the yearning for her touch, she is remembered most. Thus the myth ends not in closure, but in continuation. Each prayer uttered in the dead of night, each sigh released by a lonely soul, each yearning that refuses to be silenced, becomes another thread woven into her eternal tapestry. Kannon is near, always near, yet never fully grasped. To chase her is to wander forever. To accept her is to awaken.
And so the story leaves us in awe. We are left with serenity that soothes, yet yearning that stirs. We are left trembling with desire, yet comforted by compassion. We are left knowing that sensuality and divinity do not stand apart, but intertwine, silk and moonlight, breath and prayer, body and soul. To encounter Kannon, even in myth, is to stand on the edge of a paradox, to feel love more intimate than any mortal embrace, yet to accept it can never be possessed, to taste closeness sweeter than a kiss, yet to watch it dissolve into air, to ache, to weep, to heal, to awaken, all in the same trembling breath. And perhaps this is the truest lesson, that love does not end in fulfillment, but in transformation, that longing, far from being a curse, is the fire that burns away illusion, that the sensual, when sanctified by compassion, becomes a doorway into the eternal. Kannon will always be there, walking softly through the temples of night, her silks whispering, her gaze gentle, her presence near. She will always touch without being held, heal without being bound, love without being claimed. She will remain radiant and untouchable, the goddess of compassion who bends low enough to let mortals tremble in her nearness, yet high enough to remain forever beyond their arms. And we who hear her myth, who feel the echo of her touch in our imagination, are left changed. We carry the sweetness and the ache, the serenity and the yearning. We carry her within us, even as we know she will never be ours. That is the power of the myth, not to satisfy, but to awaken, not to resolve, but to leave us trembling with awe, not to grant possession, but to gift us with longing so sacred it becomes prayer. Kannon, radiant and unreachable, sensual and serene, whispers through the ages. Her story is not only hers, it is ours, for we too live in the tension between desire and serenity, between the ache of love and the release of compassion. In her we see the reflection of our own hearts, fragile, longing, yet capable of transcendence. And so the myth closes, but it does not end. It lingers, like moonlight on water, like the brush of silk against skin, like a breath that warms the air just before it fades. We are left in awe, suspended between yearning and peace, caught in the sweetness of the paradox. We are left trembling, as all mortals do, before the goddess who gives everything, yet belongs to none.